Namaste. Critical analysis of the Rabindranath Tagore's novel The Home and the World. Indian writing in English is essentially a product of the colonial period, flowered after independence. But the fact remains that the writing in English is not only the Indian writing in other languages of India cannot be written of as purely regional. Novels written in Indian native languages have been being translated into English. Many of these accommodate the geographical and cultural diversity of our subcontinent. Born of a political storm that swept Bengal in the wake of its partition by British rulers in 1905, Rabindranath Tagore's The Home and the World remains more than half a century after the end of the colonial rule astonishingly relevant to India today, when political fanaticism, religious prejudice, and terrorism, the issues dealt with in Tagore's book, pose serious questions about her integrity. This research work proves that The Home and the World is a powerful political novel with a message that contains the complexity and tragic dimensions of Tagore's own times and ours. Introduction. The Home and the World in the original Bengali, Ghare Bare was one of the last 1984 in a long line of extraordinary films by the Bengali director Satyajit Ray, who died in April 1992. The film recapitulates many of the central themes in the Ray's cinematic worldview as well as in that of the work of Rabindranath Tagore. Ray's frequent source of stories and inspiration. The Home and the World contains many echoes from Ray's earlier Charulata. Both films are based on stories by Tagore, The Home and the World by Rabindranath Tagore. In this novel, Tagore brings about the nationalistic topic related to Swadeshi movement, which was popular in that era. Rabindranath Tagore, like Jawaharlal Nehru, first Prime Minister of India, rejected Gandhi's vision on modernity. Gandhi saw modernity as a threat for the nation and culture, yet Tagore saw it as provided for the ideological basis for the critique of foreign domination. The novel The Home and the World focuses on the narrative of three different characters: Nikhil, a wealthy landlord, Bimla, Nikhil's wife, and Sandeep, a radical nationalist leader. At the beginning of the novel, the story is told from Bimla's point of view. In the novel, we can see that the narration is given alternatively by those three main characters. This novel tells about how Bimla and Nikhil have so many different views of gender, relationship between husband and wife, and education, freedom, and national identities. The conflict between this couple emerges after the arrival of Sandeep. Bimla is impressed by his charisma and support his view on nationalism. And the Swadeshi movement, this novel ends tragically in which Nikhil is shot in the head. Rabindranath Tagore, the novel and The Home and the World 1915 is usually read in terms of an allegory either on the historical event of the partition of Bengal in 1905 or on the nationalistic worship of Mother India around the turn of the 20th century. Such allegorical writings are possible for obvious reasons. This novel is set at the time of Swadeshi movement, which emerged as the radically nationalistic response to the act of partition engineered by the British colonial administration at a time when Vande Mataram, a song composed by Tagore's senior contemporary in Bengali literature, Bankim Chandra Chattopadhyay, had become a much used rallying cry among the nationalists. The Home and the World challenged the notion of India as an exclusive Hindu nation. It questions the validity of a nationalism that focuses on emotion rather than on economic self-sufficiency and social justice. It takes exception to the aggressive masculinity of the nationalist project. As an intense literary text, The Home and the World could be read in yet another other page in terms of other allegories. This upper paper offered an alternative reading, inspired by comparing the novel with early 20th century Vietnamese novel. The Home and the World is a novel that reads like an allegory on the failure of Indian nationalist projects circling around the issues of home versus world, tradition versus modernity, created by the active involvement of colonizer in the cultural, economic, administrative life of the colonized. It could be read as an allegory on the failure of Indian nationalism to accept its tradition and modernity, home and the world together. In addition, the novel differs offer an alternative nationalistic project that could be free India from its obsession with colonizing powers. True freedom of the nationalistic imagination will be gained by going beyond every form of ideological prejudice and separation, and by synthesizing every conceivable values that could be useful for the development and maintenance of the nation. And as a concrete implementation of his alternative nationalist project, Tagore founded Vishwa Bharati University in Santiniketan in 1921. The Home and the World was published 10 years after the waxing partition of Bengal and the beginning of magic incantation of Bande Mataram. First in Bengali 1915 and then in English 1990, the Swadeshi movement, which emerged in the wake of the partition, did not only mobilize Bengal but also spread throughout India at the beginning of a truly national movement, as a struggle between men and methods that were to lead it. Reg 939. Bande Mataram became the war cry of the opposition against the partition. Just like Swadeshi movement, it spread over the entire subcontinent. A younger conflicts within the Indian Congress about the role and function of Swadeshi led to division within the movement. The extremists adopted the Swadeshi, claiming the superiority of Indian economic, politics, and arts, while the moderates wanted to dedicate themselves to social reform. After a decade of challenging and fighting each other, the conflicting nationalist projects seemed to be neutralized when the so-called 1917 declaration made India a more directly ruled colony in terms of administration and economy. However, once Mahatma Gandhi gained control over the Indian National Congress in the early 1920s, the movement of non-cooperation gained strong footholds all over India again. The ideas of Swadeshi were revived, the economic system were reorganized, and government schools and colleges were boycotted. By January 1921, when virtually all the colleges in Calcutta, the administrative and intellectual center of Bengal, were closed, Tagore, unhappy with Gandhi's narrowness of aims, complained in a letter to Charles Freer Andrews, a professor at Santiniketan, that the non-cooperation movement was opposed to his own notions of the nation, which in his opinion should be based on cooperation. Why irony of fate in that which I what irony what irony of fate What irony of fate is this, which I should be preaching cooperation of culture between East and West on this side of the sea, just at the moment when the doctrine of non-cooperation is preached on the other side. Tagore argued that the radicalism of nationalist self-reliance, based on the principle of boycott and the central idea of Swadeshi movement, uprooted students and tempted them away from their career before any real provision was made. The Home and the World should be read as an alternative to the spirit of non-cooperation, which was electrical, the spirit of sacrifice that was in the very air we breathe. The Home and the World has not received especially kind treatment from the critics. Perhaps most damning is George Lucas' characterization of novel as a petty bourgeois yarn of the sordid kind. It is true the novel has its shortcomings. It gets dangerously close at times to political allegory, and its characters, especially the radical leader Sandeep, are exaggerated and one-dimensional. At the same time, the novel has a staunch defender in Anita Desai, who, while admitting that it is too often weighed down with ponderous rhetoric, it praises its flashes of light and color and its touches of tenderness and childishness. Despite the literary shortcomings of The Home and the World. It is an important work for understanding Tagore's view on the dangers of political extremism. The novel focuses on the Swadeshi movement in Bengal, which demanded an exclusive reliance on Indian made goods and a rejection of all foreign made products. Tagore's representation of Swadeshi typifies his attitude towards any sort of organized political activity as something over which one has little of, if any, control. So this is described in the Home and the World as a flood breaking down the dikes and sweeping all our prudence and fear before it. The novel focuses on three characters, each of whom speaks in the first person in recounting how they interact with one another. Nikhil is Bimla's husband. Sandeep is Bimla's would-be lover. Nikhil epitomizes the unselfish, progressive husband, while wishes to free his wife from oppressiveness of a traditional Indian marriage. In contrast, Sandeep is a man who thinks only of himself and who reduces man-woman relationship to brazen sexuality. He is interested in blunt things, blunt put without any finickiness. Finick, finick, finicness. He is interested in blunt things, bluntly put, without any finickiness. Bimla is represented as an innocent who, at least initially, is completely subservient to her husband. But Bimla is also much more than this. She is referred to as a Durga, the female goddess of creation, destruction, and as a Sakli, the ultimate female principle underpinning reality. In being so described, she represents the beauty, vitality, and glory of Bengal. The Home and the World is pivotal in Tagore's rejection of mass action as a force destructive to freedom and individuality. As well, the novel clearly anticipates his eventual rejection of nationalism as a frightening expression of this mass action. Finally, the book is important in laying the groundwork for Tagore's call for a new national order which allows for multi-interaction of all the people. The message of the Home and the World is clear: to deny distinctive nation individuality is to deny diversity and to ignore fundamental nature of the world. Political boundaries presume to limit and define a world that is fundamentally limitless and beyond definition. Political boundaries confirm exclusivity and they hinder sharing and oneness in the face of difference. Tagore is firmly rooted in the Indian philosophical tradition. He is concerned with birth darshana, with seeing truth. He viewed the human desire to define the world as a dogmatic exertion of ignorance. Virtually everything we do is an expression of this dogmatism, a manifestation of the ego-centeredness that drives it. So it is that in the Home and the World, Tagore uses uses a issues Tagore issues a call to return to sanity. He recognizes that pride that comes with nationhood can only lead to ignorance and to the repression of others. His message was true only for his time, and it is still true today. There are three distinctive views upon traditional nationalism represented in this novel through the key characters Nikhil, Bimla and Sandeep. Nikhil represents moderate view on nationalism. He presents the ideology of Rabindranath Tagore. He carries the most perception of the nation in Tagore's point of view. On the other hand, Sandeep represents extreme nationalistic view. Between these two distinctive views, Bimla represents the dilemmatic view on nationalism. Tagore also depicts India in the form of woman. Bimla is portrayed as the psychological and psychological resemblance. Bimla is portrayed as a physiological and psychological resemblance of the nation. This novel reveals several aspects of the conflict of ideologies, including the conflict of gender and nationalism. This novel represents Tagore's perspective in seeing the effect of Swadeshi to India. Furthermore, we can conclude that this novel reveals the ideological conflict which are happening in society as a result of modernization and the British colonization. This revelation can be seen in the way Tagore contrasts the view of Western ideology and Eastern ideology through character Nikhil, Sandeep, and Bimla. It signifies that ideological conflict could happen everywhere, even in the inside of a house. References: Anita Desai, Introduction, The Home and the World by Rabindranath Tagore, Arvindo Sri, Vande Mataram, Tagore Topo Prata, The Form of the Home and the World, Rabindranath Tagore, The Home and the World, A Critical Companion, Gupta, Kalyan Singh, Philosophy of Rabindranath Tagore, Mitra Indrani, I Will Make My Bimla One with My Country, Gender and Nationalism, Tagore's Home and the World, Modern Fiction Studies, Tagore Rabindranath, The Home and the World, Tagore Translation, Tagore Rabindranath, The Home and the World, Tagore Rabindranath, The Home and the World. Thank you.